Good afternoon. Well, we're still struggling with load shedding. Stage 4 coming into effect now until all the way through until midnight. More Stage 3 and Stage 4 through to Saturday as well. And the global transition away from coal-fired power stations towards renewable energy is underway. But there's immense pressure on our government to get this process right. You'll know the problems that we've had recently, and yet we still have to wait for 2 years for more renewable energy to come online. Dr. Crispin Olver is Executive Director of the Presidential Climate Commission. Dr. Olver, good afternoon to you. I really do appreciate the time. Thank you. We keep talking about energy and getting electricity policy right. For now, so many millions of people don't have electricity. They don't have money to take themselves off the grid. Are these people as front and center in this conversation as maybe they should be? Or is there a risk that they're actually being ignored in some of the discussions we're having?
Well, Stephen, thank you for having me. It's really great to engage this afternoon. I mean, let me say the load shedding that we're going through is a national crisis. As you say, it's affecting people very directly. It's affecting households. It's affecting medical facilities and educational facilities. And it's affecting business. This is bad for the economy. We're going to be losing jobs if it continues. And the origins of the crisis go way back. They go decades back around the investment decisions that government didn't make on time to bring new capacity on. And the reality is we're sitting with a very old coal fleet. Many of them are beyond their usable life. It's now uneconomic to run those coal-fired power stations, but we've been behind the curve in bringing alternative power onto the grid. The transition is now in front of us. We've got some very stark choices to make. What's been happening is that pricing has changed fundamentally in terms of power generation. So coal is no longer, coal used to be our hidden advantage. We've got these vast coal fields that underlie Mpumalanga and the northern parts of KZN and bits of Limpopo. So coal used to be our, hidden asset. We could generate the cheapest power in the world. It's no longer the cheapest power. If you factor in the environmental costs, the health costs, the scrubbers that we've now got to put onto coal-fired power stations, it's a lot more expensive than the other huge natural resource that we've got, which is wind and solar power in abundance. We've got some of the best wind and solar resources in the world. And it is by far the cheapest form of electricity, and it just so happens to be low carbon as well. So the solutions are, they're going to take a year or two, I'm afraid, to kick in. That is the hard reality of it. But they are right in front of us. We've got this abundant resource. You can power a modern energy grid on the basis of renewables. Not sure if you followed the example of South Australia. They've just taken the whole South Australian grid, which is powers an industrial economy, and they've put it onto renewables battery with a little bit of gas peaking plant in reserve. So it can be done.
So you say that can be done, and the South Australia example is a good example in a way that the climate is roughly similar to our own. There's a lot of sun there. And you are the Executive Director of the Presidential Climate Commission. But if Gwede Mantashe, the Minister of Energy, was part of this conversation, I'm fairly certain that the word baseload would possibly, I don't want to speak for him, but I'm fairly certain it would come out of his mouth. And he would say that we cannot just move away from coal as South Australia has done. And that takes me then to the question, is government really united on what's happening? Because I'm afraid to say, Dr. Olver, it doesn't always seem like it.
Stephen, I don't think government is completely ad idem. But let me just comment on this baseload idea. It's a little bit of an outdated concept. So yes, energy systems used to be built on this idea that you've got baseload and then which runs 24 hours a day, and then you've got mid-merit plant, which runs only for a portion of the day, and then you've got the morning and the evening peaks, and you put peaking power into that. the way that modern energy grids are being built completely moves away from it. So what you put onto the grid is your least cost and lowest carbon technologies. And then the issue is grid balancing. So how do you have dispatchable power in hand? And dispatchable power would typically come from pumped hydro, battery technology, and battery technology is evolving very rapidly at the moment. And then your sort of either gas or your diesel-fired peaking plants. All of those, at the flick of a switch, you can put the power onto the grid and balance the grid up to the required level of demand. These baseload champions are living in a different era. Power management, power grid management has completely moved on. In terms of Minister Mantashe, what he does do very well is, I think, articulate the concerns of a particular constituency. As you know, he used to be a coal miner. He organized coal miners. And I think it's a very important voice to have in the conversation, which is, we can't just be doing this transition without thinking about the social consequences of the transition and the impact it's going to have on people's jobs and livelihoods. But you can't dictate energy policy simply based on the interests of one particular sector. So, the coal miners and the coal truckers and the coal workers can't have a complete lock on the government's energy policy. What we need to be doing is making long-term strategic decisions in the interests of the people as a whole, of the entire country. And that is not just about, we're not gung-ho decarbonization. We would argue, yes, we must decarbonize, but we've got to do it in a way that ensures we have energy access and energy security, that poor people are able to get connected into the grid or get provided at least with decentralized household-based energy solutions. So, our transition has to talk to the development needs of the country and the development needs of our people. But that doesn't mean we have to simply, bow to all the whims of the coal sector.
So the head of the Just Transition at Eskom, Mandy Rambaros, told us earlier this week. She said that there are microgrids. I'd always presumed a microgrid, was like a very complex string of lights or something. But she actually described it much more accurately than I could as a container with a lot of solar panels on the top of it.
Yeah.
She suggested that one microgrid could produce 25 kilowatts of electricity, enough for 25 homes. Let's call it two suburban blocks or 2 blocks in a township. And that would cost only 1.5 million rand. As she described it, that's literally free. That seems like science fiction to me. Could that work?
It certainly can. Eskom's already built the modules for this, and they've been testing it, and it works fantastically. And, it's a little bit like so what's been happening now during this load shedding era? The middle class has already opted out of the energy system. So, a lot of us have got solar panels, we've got batteries and inverters, and we're able to survive the load shedding period. That is, it's an expensive solution. It does, of course, have a payback period. So, after 7-8 years of doing that, you've already paid off the capital, and it's going to last you for 20 years. So it makes economic sense. But there's an affordability issue. And I think the solution that Eskom's come up with, which is basically extending that same system so that you include a larger number of households, it brings the household cost down. And as part of our guarantee of energy access and energy security for poor households, I think the state should be rolling out the solution to all South Africans.
Dr. Crispin Olver, thank you. Executive Director for the Presidential Climate Commission. I think there's a lot more to come on the technology around electricity and this transition in the near future.